What if I told you that some old buffalo nickels sitting quietly in coin jars, drawers, and collections are not just common 5-cent coins? Some examples can attract serious attention from collectors because of their age, condition, surviving population, and historical story. And the crazy part is, many people may have these old coins without realizing what they're holding. Today, we're looking at 6 buffalo nickels that deserve a much closer inspection. These aren't coins you should casually throw back into circulation. They're the kind of old American coins collectors keep searching for, studying, and protecting. One small detail, a date, a mint mark, or the condition of the original surfaces can completely change the conversation. So before you spend another old buffalo nickel, stop and check it. You could be holding a piece of American history that collectors would love to find. Stay with me until the very end, because we're going through all 6 coins, and the final one could be the one that makes you look at your old coin collection completely differently. Welcome back to Hidden Coin Millions. Let's start the hunt. First up, before you toss that old buffalo nickel into a jar and forget about it, take a second look at the date. A 1925 buffalo nickel may look worn, dark, and completely ordinary, but this is exactly the kind of old American coin that can make collectors stop and take a much closer look. And if you happen to find one in your collection, you may be looking at a coin worth far more than its original 5-cent face value. The 1925 buffalo nickel was struck during an important period in American history. The country was moving through the energetic years of the Roaring Twenties, while the U.S. Mint continued producing nickels for everyday commerce. This coin was never created to be a treasure. It was a standard 5-cent piece made to circulate through stores, pockets, cash registers, and countless daily transactions. That ordinary purpose is what makes surviving examples so interesting today. On the obverse, you'll see the famous Native American portrait facing right, with the inscription Liberty along the upper right side and the date 1925 below. On the reverse is the powerful American bison, standing on a raised mound, with United States of America around the top, 5 cents below, and E pluribus unum above the animal. There is no mint mark on this 1925 example, meaning it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, where coins of this type did not receive a mint mark. The coin is made primarily of copper and nickel, with a composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. It weighs approximately 5 grams, measures about 21.2 millimeters across, and is roughly 1.9 millimeters thick. Its edge is plain, with no lettering or reading. Here's something collectors understand very well. Age alone does not automatically make a coin extremely valuable. What matters is how many examples survived, how they survived, and what condition they are in today. Buffalo nickels were heavily circulated, and the high points of the design, especially the date and the buffalo's details, could wear down quickly. That makes a clearly readable date and strong original detail especially important. So what should you inspect first? Start with the date. Then examine the Native American portrait, the buffalo's horn and shoulder, the lettering, and the overall surfaces. Look for original color and texture rather than trying to make the coin look newer. Cleaning can leave scratches and unnatural surfaces that collectors strongly dislike. And this is where the story gets even more interesting. In today's collector market, this 1925 buffalo nickel can be valued at approximately $114,900, an incredible difference from its original face value of just 5 cents. Its age, history, condition, originality, and collector demand can all influence its value. Certain specimens have sold for impressive prices, while attractive original examples become harder to find. If you discover a 1925 buffalo nickel like this, do not spend this coin. Never clean it. Original surfaces matter, and professional grading may be worthwhile if the coin appears especially well preserved or valuable. Keep it protected, handle it carefully by the edges, and let a qualified expert evaluate it before making any decisions. So now, I have to ask you, could a 1925 Buffalo nickel be sitting unnoticed in your old coin jar, family collection, or forgotten box right now? Check your coins carefully because the next one could make this search even more exciting. Comment Rare Coins Hunter if you're still watching. I want to know who the real treasure hunters are. Next up, now take a close look at the next date, 1914. This old Buffalo nickel has already lived through more than a century of American history, and its circulated condition tells a story of how heavily coins like this once moved through everyday life. But there's something about a 1914 Buffalo nickel that makes collectors slow down and inspect it instead of tossing it into an ordinary change jar. In 1914, America was changing rapidly. The country was becoming more industrialized, cities were growing, businesses were expanding, and the United States was entering an important new era. Right in the middle of that everyday American life, the U.S. Mint was producing the Buffalo nickel as a practical 5-cent coin for commerce. It wasn't designed to sit inside a collection. It was meant to be spent. That means every surviving example today carries a little piece of that era with it. The Buffalo nickel was designed by James Earl Fraser. On the front or obverse, you'll see his famous Native American portrait facing right. Around the upper right portion is the inscription Liberty, while the date 1914 appears below the portrait. Turn the coin over, and you'll find the massive American bison standing on a raised mound, surrounded by United States of America. Above the buffalo is the motto E pluribus unum, and at the bottom is 5 cents. Now look carefully at the missing mint mark. There is no mint mark on this 1914 example because it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. That distinction matters because mint marks tell collectors where a coin was produced. Buffalo nickels from Denver and San Francisco carry D or S mint marks on the reverse below 5 cents, while Philadelphia examples from this period have no mint mark. This is a standard copper-nickel 5-cent coin, made from 75% copper and 25% nickel. It weighs 5 grams, measures about 21.2 millimeters across, and is approximately 1.95 millimeters thick with a plain edge. Production numbers also give us an important part of the story. More than 20 million 1914 Buffalo nickels were struck at Philadelphia. But surviving coins are another matter. Circulation wore away the high points of the design, and the date on Buffalo nickels is especially vulnerable to wear. Collectors therefore pay close attention to how clearly the date remains visible and how much detail survives on the Native American portrait and buffalo. And here's where you need to be careful. A circulated coin can still attract collector attention, but condition makes an enormous difference. Look first at the date, then the portrait, the buffalo's horn and shoulder, the lettering, and the overall originality of the surfaces. That gray layer you see should not tempt you to polish it. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and may reduce collector appeal. Now comes the number that makes this 1914 Buffalo nickel worth a much closer look. From an original face value of only 5 cents, it can reach approximately $145,700 in today's collector market. Collectors look closely at preservation, surviving examples, historical significance, and demand. If you have one, keep it untouched and avoid cleaning or damaging the coin. Auction records also show just how dramatically condition can change the picture. For example, a PCGS graded 1914 Buffalo nickel in MS 67 Plus reached $30,550 at auction. That does not mean every 1914 nickel is worth that amount, or that every coin reaches the value we've discussed, but it shows why serious collectors pay such close attention to grade and originality. So before you dismiss an old buffalo nickel because it looks worn, check that date again. Do not spend this coin. Never clean it. Original surfaces matter, and professional grading may be worthwhile if your example appears promising. And remember, we're only getting deeper into this hunt. The next coin could give you another reason to stop spending old nickels without checking them first. Next up, here's a date that can make an old buffalo nickel suddenly feel a whole lot more interesting: 1920. Imagine holding a coin that was already being spent in America more than a century ago, and somehow it survived with its original mint state character still intact. That's exactly why an uncirculated 1920 buffalo nickel deserves a serious second look. 1920 was a fascinating year in America. The country was coming out of the First World War era. Business and commerce were booming, and millions of Americans were using coins like this in everyday transactions. The U.S. Mint produced the buffalo nickel as a standard 5-cent piece for circulation. It was never intended to become a collectible treasure. People simply spent it. And that makes a well-preserved example today much more interesting. This coin was designed by James Earl Fraser. On the obverse, you'll see the famous Native American portrait facing right, with the inscription Liberty near the upper right side and the date 1920 below. Turn it over, and the reverse shows the powerful American bison standing on a flat line. Around it are the inscriptions United States of America, E pluribus unum, and 5 cents. Now check the mint mark location carefully. This example has no mint mark, which identifies it as a Philadelphia Mint issue. The Philadelphia Mint did not place a mint mark on these nickels, while Denver and San Francisco examples carried a D or S below 5 cents. The specifications are classic buffalo nickel, 75% copper and 25% nickel, a weight of 5 grams, a diameter of about 21.2 millimeters, and a thickness of approximately 1.95 millimeters. The edge is plain, and here's something collectors pay close attention to. The Philadelphia Mint produced 93,000 buffalo nickels dated 1920. That sounds like a huge number, and in circulated grades, the issue is generally not considered rare. But the story changes when you start talking about high-quality, uncirculated coins. PCGS notes that 1920 is harder to find in uncirculated and gem condition than several earlier Philadelphia issues, with especially high-grade survivors becoming much more challenging. That's why your uncirculated example matters. The black shade or dark toning should never be automatically treated as damage. Collectors inspect the original surfaces, luster, strike, date, lettering, and the amount of detail remaining on the Native American portrait and buffalo. They also look closely for scratches, cleaning, and signs of artificial alteration. And the auction history shows why condition can completely change the conversation. A PCGS MS65 Plus 1920 Buffalo Nickel sold for $720 in a 2025 Stack's Bowers auction, while another MS65 Plus example sold for $1,560 in an earlier auction. A PCGS MS67 example reached $12,650 at heritage auctions. Now comes the number that makes this 1920 Buffalo Nickel worth a much closer look. From an original face value of only 5 cents, it can reach approximately $118,800 in today's collector market. Collectors look closely at preservation, surviving examples, historical significance, and demand. If you have one, keep it untouched and avoid cleaning or damaging the coin. So if you ever find a 1920 buffalo nickel with strong original surfaces and an uncirculated appearance, slow down before doing anything. Do not spend this coin. Never clean it. Original surfaces matter, and professional grading may be worthwhile. Hold it only by the edges, protect it in an appropriate holder, and have it examined by a qualified professional if you believe you may have an exceptional specimen. And don't leave yet, because this buffalo nickel hunt is far from over. The next date could give you another reason to check every old nickel hiding in your collection before it disappears into circulation again. Next up, there's something about a 1934 buffalo nickel that makes this old 5-cent piece worth slowing down for, and when you see that little D mint mark, the story gets even more interesting. This is a coin from an America still struggling through the Great Depression, yet it was being produced for ordinary people to use in everyday transactions. More than 90 years later, a surviving example can attract serious collector attention. In 1934, America was still deep in the Great Depression. Families were watching every penny, unemployment remained painfully high, and the country was slowly working toward recovery. At the same time, the Denver Mint produced buffalo nickels for circulation. This particular issue had a mintage of 480,000 pieces, making it much smaller than many other buffalo nickel issues. The coin itself was designed by James Earl Fraser. On the obverse, you'll see the famous Native American portrait facing right, with the inscription Liberty beside the portrait and the date 1934 below. Flip it over and you'll see Fraser's powerful American bison, surrounded by United States of America. Above the buffalo is E pluribus unum, while 5 cents appears underneath. Now check the reverse carefully. The small d beneath 5 cents identifies this coin as a Denver Mint issue. That tiny letter may look insignificant, but for collectors, the mint mark is one of the first details to verify because it tells you where the coin was produced. This buffalo nickel is made from 75% copper and 25% nickel. It weighs 5 grams, measures about 21.2 millimeters in diameter, is approximately 1.95 millimeters thick, and has a plain edge. But here's where the 1934 with D becomes especially interesting. Describes it as the rarest buffalo nickel of the 1930s in mint state and gem condition. One reason is that many examples suffered from weak strikes, particularly around the buffalo's horn. Estimates roughly 14,000 examples survive across all grades, with only about 700 estimated at 65 or better. Your example is described as being in fine condition with a brown layer, so don't make the mistake of thinking its appearance needs to be improved. Collectors inspect the date first, then the D mint mark, the portrait details, the buffalo's horn and shoulder, the lettering, and especially the originality of the surfaces. Original surfaces matter. Cleaning, polishing, or harsh chemicals can leave permanent damage and hurt collector appeal. Auction activity shows just how much condition can change the value. AU58 example sold for $60 in 2019, while a much higher grade PCGS 66 Plus example brought $5,760 at a 2025 Stack's Bowers auction. PCGS also records an auction high of $23,500 for an MS 66 Plus example. Now comes the number that makes this 1934 with D buffalo nickel worth a much closer look. From an original face value of only 5 cents, it can reach approximately $98,900 in today's collector market. Collectors look closely at preservation, surviving examples, historical significance, and demand. If you have one, keep it untouched and avoid cleaning or damaging the coin. So if a 1934 Buffalo nickel turns up in an old collection, don't rush to spend it. Do not spend this coin. Never clean it. Protect those original surfaces, handle it carefully by the edges, and remember that professional grading may be worthwhile if the coin appears unusually strong. And now we're getting dangerously close to the end of this Buffalo nickel hunt. Keep watching, because the next coin has another date you'll want to check immediately when you search through your old nickels. Comment Rare Coins Hunter if you're still watching. I want to know who the real treasure hunters are. Next up, before you move past another old Buffalo nickel, stop at the date, 1925. At first glance, this one may look like just another worn 5-cent piece, especially with that dark black shade and fine condition. But this is where experienced collectors know better than to judge an old coin by appearance alone. Sometimes the smallest details are what make you look twice. In 1925, America was living through the energetic years of the Roaring Twenties. Cars, radios, movies, and modern consumer culture were changing everyday life, while ordinary Americans continued using coins like this one for everything from small purchases to daily business. The U.S. Mint produced the Buffalo nickel as a standard 5-cent coin for circulation. Nobody spending it back then knew that collectors many decades later would be studying these pieces so closely. Designed by James Earl Fraser, the Buffalo nickel has one of the most recognizable designs in American coinage. On the obverse, the Native American portrait faces right. Alongside the portrait is the inscription Liberty with the date 1925 below. Flip it over and you'll see the American bison standing on a raised mound. The reverse carries United States of America, e pluribus unum, and 5 cents. Now check the mint mark area carefully. There is no mint mark on this example, which means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. That's important because mint marks identify the production facility, and Philadelphia Buffalo nickels from this period traditionally carried no mint mark. The specifications are classic Buffalo nickel, 75% copper and 25% nickel, weighing 5 grams, measuring approximately 21.2 millimeters across with a plain edge. The Philadelphia Mint produced 565,100 Buffalo nickels dated 1925. That is a substantial original production number and describes the issue as semi-common in circulated grades but somewhat scarce in mint state. Its estimated surviving population is much smaller than the original mintage, with estimating around 11,000 examples surviving across all grades. That's why condition becomes so important. Your example is described as fine condition with a black shade, so collectors would first examine the date, the Native American portrait, the buffalo's horn and shoulder, the lettering, and the overall originality of the surfaces. Dark coloration does not automatically mean something is wrong with a coin, but you should never try to improve it yourself. And auction history gives us another reason to be careful. AU 55, 1925, Buffalo nickel sold for $60 in 2019, while a much rarer high-grade MS-67 example reached $32,200 at auction. That enormous difference shows exactly why professional grading and condition can matter so much in the collector market. Now comes the number that makes this 1925 Buffalo nickel worth a much closer look. From an original face value of only 5 cents, it can reach approximately $113,500 in today's collector market. Collectors look closely at preservation, surviving examples, historical significance, and demand. If you have one, keep it untouched and avoid cleaning or damaging the coin. So if you discover a 1925 Buffalo nickel in an old collection, don't assume that its worn appearance means it has no importance. Do not spend this coin. Never clean it. Original surfaces matter, and professional grading may be worthwhile if the coin appears especially promising. Handle it carefully by the edges and protect it from scratches, chemicals, and unnecessary handling. And that brings us to the end of this buffalo nickel hunt. But remember, the real treasure may already be sitting in your own collection. Check those old coins before you spend them, because you never know which date could deserve a much closer look. Comment Rare Coins Hunter if you're still watching. I want to know who the real treasure hunters are. Next up, here's a date that might look ordinary at first, but seasoned collectors know exactly why it deserves a closer inspection. 1927. This old buffalo nickel has a brown spotted appearance and an old, circulated look, yet it comes from an era when these 5-cent pieces were moving through everyday American life. And when a coin has survived for nearly a century, the details that remain can become very important. 1927 was part of America's Roaring Twenties, a period of booming consumer culture, new technology, automobiles, radios, and major social change. While all of that was happening, the U.S. Mint was producing buffalo nickels as ordinary money for ordinary people. These coins were meant to be spent, not saved. That makes the survivors we examine today little pieces of everyday American history. The design was created by James Earl Fraser. On the obverse, you'll see the famous Native American portrait facing right, with the inscription Liberty near the upper right side and the date 1927 underneath. Turn it over and you'll see the American bison, with United States of America surrounding the upper portion, EE pluribus unum above the buffalo and 5 cents below. Now look carefully where the mint mark would normally appear. There is no mint mark on this 1927 buffalo nickel, identifying it as a Philadelphia Mint issue. The Philadelphia Mint produced 981,000 examples that year. This standard buffalo nickel is composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel. It weighs 5 grams, measures approximately 21.2 millimeters across, is about 1.95 millimeters thick, and has a plain edge. But here's the part collectors understand. A large mintage does not tell the entire survival story. PCGS estimates around 14,027 buffalo nickels survive across all grades, with roughly 3,000 surviving at 60 or better and about 1,500 at 65 or better. That means preservation can dramatically change how collectors view an otherwise standard issue. Your example is described as having brown spots and an old, circulated appearance. So what should you inspect first? Start with the date. Then check the Native American portrait, the lettering, the buffalo's horn and shoulder, and the overall surfaces. Collectors also look for signs of cleaning, scratches, unnatural coloration, or other surface problems. Brown toning or spots should never be a reason to grab a cleaning solution. Original surfaces matter. Auction activity shows exactly how strongly condition can influence collector interest. A PCGS MS65 1927 Buffalo nickels sold for $204 in 2019, while a PCGS MS67 example reached $3,840 in 2021. The auction record listed by PCGS is $24,000 for an MS67 Plus example sold by Stax Bowers in 2019. Now comes the number that makes this 1927 Buffalo nickel worth a much closer look. From an original face value of only 5 cents, it can reach approximately $105,500 in today's collector market. Collectors look closely at preservation, surviving examples, historical significance, and demand. If you have one, keep it untouched and avoid cleaning or damaging the coin. So if you discover a 1927 Buffalo nickel hiding in an old collection, don't dismiss it simply because it looks old. Do not spend this coin. Never clean it. Protect the original surfaces, handle it carefully by the edges, and professional grading may be worthwhile if the coin appears unusually strong. And that brings us to the final stretch of this Buffalo nickel hunt. You've made it this far, so keep your eyes open, because one overlooked date can completely change the way you look at that old coin collection. And before you go, don't forget that the next hidden treasure could already be sitting inside your own coin collection. Take a few minutes, check those old dates, look closely at the mint marks, and never judge an old coin just by its appearance. If you enjoyed this treasure hunt, hit that like button, subscribe to Hidden Coin Millions, and turn on notifications so you never miss another rare coin discovery. Share this video with a friend or family member who loves old coins. You might help them discover something they never knew they had. And remember, every old coin has a story, but some stories can be worth serious money. Comment Rare Coins Hunter if you're still watching. I want to know who the real treasure hunters are.